Hi, gang. It's Friday. I am fascinated by all things history, mystery, conspiracy, and paranormal. I love to do deep dives into topics that I often stumble upon sheerly by chance. And I love to tell tales. So, welcome to Sit and Spin. I will tell you a story as I spin a yarn. This week, I'm just received some fabulous sparkly fiber. I got this from Kamaj Fiber Arts, and I'll link that in the description. You can see how pretty and sparkly it is. And it's laid out right now in a beautiful gradient. So I'm just going to spin my singles and probably chain ply to maintain that gradient because I think it looks really cool. So this week, our story, we're going to continue our trilogy on the Philadelphia experiment, the Montauk project, and MK Ultra. Last week we did Philadelphia experiment. This week we're going into the Montauk project. This is some crazy stuff. You might want to grab your tinfoil, wear a little hat, feel a little safer that way. Or you might just think it's crazy, but I love this story. So let's get started. Let's start with the basics. What is the Montauk Project? Well, the short story is it was a series of government experiments into mind control and time travel. Now, these experiments were apparently conducted at the Montauk Airforce Station, now called Camp Hero, on Long Island, New York. It's recently seen a revived interest as the Netflix series Stranger Things is based on the urban legend. In fact, Stranger Things was originally called Montauk. Now, my interest predated Stranger Things, so I'm just going to delve into the conspiracy and let you see your own correlations to the show, if you enjoy that sort of thing. In the beginning, there was Camp Hero. The base was commissioned in 1942 by the Army as a coastal defense station. There's 3 gun batteries meant to defend New York against attack from the Germans. The government attempted to disguise the base as a fishing village. Military structures were designed to look like cottages, and even the gym was disguised as a church. You can still go and see the remains of the base today. In 1947, the Army deactivated the base, and in 1951, Camp Hero was transferred to the Air Force. They installed the huge Sage radar dish. You can still see pictures of it today. It's absolutely massive. Deteriorating, though, it's an amazing, creepy sight. The Air Force remained active at Camp Hero until 1982, and in 1984, the land was donated to the National Park Service, and they transferred ownership to the New York State Parks Department. Camp Hero State Park officially opened to the public in 2002. One weird thing about this, the Air Force only donated the surface land to the parks. Everything underground still belongs to the Air Force. Here we go. Why? Why would they retain control of the underground? Maybe for the mineral rights or the possibility of oil under the base? Or maybe it's to hide the shameful secret of their experiments carried out in bunkers and tunnels beneath the base. Most people credit Preston B. Nichols with publicizing the secrets in his 1992 self-published book, The Montauk Project: Experiments in Time. But he was just one of many who correlated all the other information put out by our previous chat topic, Carl Allen, and a new player, Alfred Bielek. Again, this story becomes as much about the people involved as the story itself. Let's look into Alfred Bielek. In 1988, A 57-year-old came forward claiming that after watching the 1984 movie The Philadelphia Experiment, that he experienced an overwhelming case of deja vu and was able to unlock a massive store of repressed memories about his extensive involvement with the experiment and something else called the Montauk Project. Just to give some reference in case you're bad at mental math like me, that means he was born around 1931, which would have made him about 12 at the time of the Philadelphia experiment. Just hold on to that information for the moment. Bielek claimed that he and his brother Duncan Cameron, both in their 20s, were crew members on the Eldridge when the wormhole was open, which is what allowed the Eldridge to disappear. Cameron and Bielek became so scared that they jumped off the ship mid-incident and ended up in the middle of Camp Hero on August 12, 1983. He and his brother were convinced to go back to their original timeline and stop the Philadelphia experiment from ever happening, which they did. Apparently, this explains why there's no current evidence in this timeline that the Philadelphia experiment happened. But after leaving the Navy, Bielek finished his education in electronics and was so in demand by military contractors that they recruited him into a top-secret operation involving alien technology and research on psychic abilities, the Montauk Project. Now, this is the in his 20s Bielek that jumped back to stop the Philadelphia experiment from happening. So his life is continuing. He's now got his education in electronics, and he's going to work for the military on the Montauk Project. So the Montauk Project is taking place on Long Island in New York. Bielek was living in California. But he was so important to the project that he was granted access to the secret network of high-speed trains that ran under the country, so he could continue to work his day job, then just jump a train, cross the country, moonlight for the government at Montauk. Of course, once the time tunnel was perfected, he didn't need that train anymore. Under Project Montauk, Bielek befriended our author friend, Preston Nichols, in the 1970s, and together they developed the Montauk Chair, a mind-reading device that was central to the entire project. They claim it used electromagnetism to amp up the psychic power of any who sat in it. We're going to come back to that too in a minute, but let's finish with Bielek first. After being the program director for the psychics who worked at Montauk in the 70s, Bielek had considerable control over the project. He claimed he was afforded so-called business trips to places like Mars and to different times. But when he went public with his adventures, the government disavowed him and didn't even do him the dignity of calling him a crackpot. They just let him talk and lecture, so he looked like a crackpot. Bielek believed he couldn't be harmed or stopped because his time-traveling experiences locked him into this timeline, that his presence balanced the effects of their prior time-traveling experiments. In fact, he said that his real identity was Edward Cameron, son of a naval career officer, and that he had been regressed to being a 9-month-old baby in 1927 and was given to Arthur and Albertina Bielek to raise as their own. So at the time of the Philadelphia experiment, he was actually Edward Cameron and in his 20s and able to jump from the ship, setting off everything. Bielek has a ton of other stories to tell. I'm just giving you a quick overview on what's relevant to our topic today. His stories of the Montauk Project were the only stories that have other people to back them up. One of them was Preston Nichols, who helped Bielek with the Montauk Chair. So let's go that way. Along with the Montauk Chair, they had the psychic Montauk Boys. I'm going to explain about them in a minute. This story isn't linear, and I don't want to stray too far into the weeds along the way. Just know they're boys, and they're psychic. One of the Montauk boys would lie down in the chair and go into a trance. A group of coils would pick up the emanations, and a bank of radios, designed by none other than Nikola Tesla himself, would pick up and digitize the thought into computer code. Then the radar tower, the Sage Tower, this huge structure, was used to turn thought into reality. Just a personal side note here. Sounds a little like Randonautica, doesn't it? It's creepy. The chair was then used to open up a vortex for time travel, to collect and amplify the fear generated by the Montauk boys, and to spy on others through remote viewing, or the seeing eye, as Nichols called it. He wrote, quote, "With a lock of a person's hair or another appropriate object in his hand, Duncan could concentrate on the person and be able to see as if he was seeing through their eyes, hearing through their ears, and feeling through their body. He could actually see through other people, anywhere on the planet," end quote. Duncan was one of the Montauk boys, and oh yes, he was Al Bielek's brother. So who are these Montauk boys? They were runaways and kidnapped boys with psychic abilities. They were spirited away to the base, and there they were subjected to both physical and mental torture in order to break their minds so they could be reprogrammed. Some were as young as 4. According to Nichols, those children were so psychologically broken that most would forget all about their time at Camp Hero. But one man claims to have recovered his memories of the Montauk Project. Stuart Swerdlow, a 52-year-old man in 2017, said he was one of the Montauk boys. Again, for the math challenged like me, that means he was born in 1965 and would have been a young teenager around 1980 when these experiments were reaching their height. Swerdlow claimed he was tortured and broken down at Montauk, that they would hold his head underwater until he nearly drowned, so he would listen and obey to his so-called rescuer. He said they used LSD to put their brains into an altered state, and that staffers even sexually abused the Montauk boys to break them down even more. Once they were controlled, the boys were sent to places and times like Mars and back to biblical times. The experiments came to an early end, though, when Nichols, Duncan Cameron, and other participants decided the experiments were going too far. Nichols wrote, quote, "We finally decided we'd had enough of the whole experiment. The contingency program was activated by someone approaching Duncan while he was in the chair and simply whispering, 'The time is now.' At this moment, he let loose a monster from his subconscious," end quote. Whatever was envisioned on the Montauk chair would first appear on the transmitter screen before being manifested in the real world. But because Duncan was a very strong psychic, the monster didn't manifest in the lab, but elsewhere in the base. It was big, hungry, and nasty, and it would eat anything it could find, and it smashed everything in sight. Strangely enough, everyone who saw it described a different beast, as if it was manifested from their own nightmares. The only way to remove the creature from existence was to destroy all the equipment and send the beast back to its original dimension. The basement levels of Camp Hero were then flooded with cement, and anyone involved with the project had their memories wiped using MKUltra techniques. The Sage radar facility, however, was used as a landmark for boats sailing around the Fork of Long Island, so they had to leave that standing, the only piece of equipment left from the Montauk Project. Of course, the government denies any of this happened, but MKUltra has since proven to be real, and I'm going to tell you all about that next week. For this week, let's see what we can find to contradict the tales told by Al Bielek, Preston Nichols, and Stuart Swerdlow. Al Bielek, he told some crazy stories, and I haven't even touched on the things he's claimed. It's just a ride into insanity. But there are plenty of people who still believe him and the things he claimed. Do an internet search on him, and you'll see why I just dismiss anything he says. Preston Nichols, on the other hand, seems to be a little more legitimate. I couldn't find any info on him beyond his author status, and that strikes me as odd. You'd think someone out there would have a website proving he was spouting nonsense, but I didn't find anything. Nothing on his early life, no definitive biography, nothing, which is weird. Stuart Swerdlow is now Dr. Reverend Stuart A. Swerdlow. Yes, you heard me right, Dr. Reverend, and is known for his work to expose the truth and enlighten people in the fields of alternative science, spirituality, therapy, mind control, deprogramming, and truth research. He's written books, and he is all over the internet with his, well, I'll call it a religion. He's actually kind of a scary guy. Do I believe him? No idea. Do I believe in the Montauk Project? Again, I don't know. I'll offer the words of filmmaker Christopher Garantano, who released a documentary titled The Montauk Chronicles. Quote, "The more I researched, the more I've begun to believe it is not so ludicrous. We know that there was military interest in paranormal phenomenon. Project Stargate, which began in 1978 and was later declassified, looked at whether physics could perform remote viewing and see events from great distances. MKUltra used vulnerable people like prisoners. So why is it so far-fetched that orphans or runaway boys could be targeted? They seem exactly the sort of subjects who would be easy to take, and Montauk would have been the ideal facility." End quote. Okay, first of all, Project Stargate? What? Guess what's going to be a future sit and spin, because I have to know what Project Stargate is. Apparently, I am woefully uninformed. But on this topic, I'll just say, combined with next week's topic, I'm not sure what I believe anymore. I mean, I've hardly even touched on the depth of the information on the Montauk Project, just offered something of an overview. If you were interested, there's so much information on the net that you can spend months reviewing it all. And your brains might start leaking out your ears, just so you're warned, which is why I kind of pulled back and just did a quick overview on the people who are most strongly involved with the tales of the Montauk Project. I'll let you mull this chapter over, and next week we'll look at the one thing that makes me think this isn't all just nonsense, and that's MKUltra. If you want to talk top secret, scary government experiments, this is the one. And we're going to do a deep dive on it next week. For now, I hope you enjoyed a good yarn, and I will see you next week. Bye.